What's going on, everybody? It is that time again. The Sooners Illustrated Podcast, episode 140.
140.
On this Monday, December 30th, 2024. Final show of 2024. Josh Callaway, James E. Jackson, Tom Green with you. It is a post-game reaction Monday. We had the bowl game on Friday, Oklahoma and Navy down at Fort Worth. James and I were there. Tom was dialed in, of course, as well. We're not going to go as in-depth as normal. Some extenuating circumstances. We will recap the game a little bit, as always, though, on a Monday. And then we're into offseason. Big picture. Oklahoma, things are not good around the program right now. Can they fix it? What do they got to do to fix it? We'll get into all that, into the weeds a little bit here on the Monday. And we do have some more transfer portal stuff to get into. A couple of additions have been made since the last show. Also had one pretty notable departure yesterday. So we'll recap the latest movement there in the transfer portal as well on a busy Monday as we wrap up 2024. But gentlemen, let's start with the bowl game, and then we'll get into some of the offseason and portal stuff. So, we had the instant reaction on Friday with Colin and I. So, I got into it a little bit then. But for you guys, just kind of what were the things that stood out? And like I said, normally we go pretty in-depth pulling apart these games. I don't see much reason to do that here, but I will open up the floor to you guys to kind of, I guess, what were your main takeaways from what was obviously another ugly loss, the latest? We've had a lot of these just this year, but the past few years. Another game where I felt like Oklahoma should have won. I feel like we say that all the time, get to the end, and it's like, how did they lose that game? That was certainly the case on Friday morning in Fort Worth. For you guys, what were the takeaways? What were the things that stood out the most from just the latest, rough loss for this team?
Do we want to start with the good? Get that out of the way?
You can,
yeah. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of it, but I thought that Michael Huggins handled himself very well for his first start since that South Carolina debacle. Completed 65% of his passes, attempted 43 passes. Probably should have had like 5, 6, 7 more completions if some of those receivers hold on to some of those drops. But overall, I thought that he handled himself very well and showed that, hey, like he's still, people need to remember he was just a freshman this year. Like he got thrown in, and when nobody really expected him to have to play this season, because Jackson Arnold, everybody thought was going to be the next guy. But I think that there's clearly something there that Michael Hawkins is going to be able to develop into a really good player. Certainly, nobody kind of expects him to be the starter next year now that John Mateer is coming in. But, if he stays in the program, I think he has a chance to develop into a really good player after Mateer leaves.
That's a good point. I mean, like Michael Hawkins is what I was going to talk about because you spoke on it. 7 of his 15 incompletions were drops. And a lot of those drops were like big plays that probably would have changed the game a lot. Like you talk about some of those deep shots. It's like 2 of them were over 40 yards. He had the touchdown run of his that was over 40 yards. They got called back for a holding call. And like, you saw some things like this guy can be a playmaker. I mean, the first touchdown pass of his where he, broke back the other side of the field and found Zion Kearney. Like that is like Kyler Murray type stuff, man. Like that's just playing around. It seemed like in the backyard and you make a big play. And so like you see really, really good things from Michael Hawkins that, like Tom said, if he stays in the program and get some development, Ben Arbuckle being there as a quarterback coach is going to help out a lot for him just in terms of development. There's some things that we still see, like some of his decision-making, sometimes leaving the pocket too soon. Some of those things can be fixed with development, and that's a good reason why, Ben Arbuckle can be a really good positive for the entire room, not just John Mateer as a whole. So if we're going to keep the positive, I'll stop there and we can move on to the
that was about it. Yeah, no, I mean, I think if you're spinning it for an OU fan, I mean, the one position that Ben Arbuckle has been involved in early on is quarterback, and Michael Hawkins did have his best game, maybe the best game for an Oklahoma quarterback this year. I mean, one of the better ones, certainly had the best play, the scramble and bomb to Zion Kearney. He did some nice things for sure. And look, John Mateer is going to be the guy next year. I'd be shocked if he wasn't. But I think he clearly showed himself as a guy down the road, like with more development and more time. He's still just a freshman. I mean, he's a kid,
Exactly.
So, I think that was really probably the most encouraging thing. You guys are right about that.
It was like OU's second. It was OU's like second best passing game this season. I think the OU stats people told us after the game. I can't remember who the first was, but it's probably the Temple game, obviously, because that was what it was. But yeah, it was pretty good overall.
Yeah, I'd also say, if we're sticking on the positives real quick, I liked what I saw from Ivan Carrion and Zion
Yeah,
Kearney. I
yeah.
know Zion Kearney had that one drop that, he really wished he would have, been able to haul in. But Ivan Carrion, 7 catches on 7 targets. I think, 72 yards receiving. Thought he made some really good blocks downfield, too. That sprung some bigger runs. Zion Kearney, obviously, that touchdown pass, a lot of the attention is going to go to what Michael Hawkins did to make it happen. But
Mm-hmm.
great job by Zion Kearney on the scramble drill to cut back across the field and get open for that one.
Mhm.
So I think there is some promising pieces there coming up in the wide receiver room. I know that room was much maligned this year with all the injuries and everything. And, Deion Burks was unavailable again in this game. He'll be back next year. They're bringing in 3 guys from the portal. But I'm kind of interested in seeing what, a Zion Kearney looks like in year 2, what an Ivan Carrion looks like in year 2. Because even though those guys played a bunch more, they weren't really factors in the passing game this year because Oklahoma's passing game wasn't much of a passing game this year.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Can I shout out Jake Roberts too? I mean, on the last drive at least, like to really pull it off. He had a drop slant pass that he should have had. He told me he should have had, and then he had the catch on the sideline that was ruled not a catch.
Right.
That ended up being a 4th and long, and he makes the catch after that to get the first down, and then obviously scores a touchdown in the final seconds.
Yeah.
Like that's a pretty good moment for that guy because as he's talked about throughout the season, playing at OU was his dream, and like that was a really good, I think, ending for him. Besides losing, but like having those individual moments for himself there to really cement his legacy at OU, that was pretty good.
For sure. And that was a cool moment. And it kind of makes those bright spots kind of make the stretches in between that much more frustrating.
Yeah.
Overall, guys, I mean, obviously the offense, great start. It was 14-0, the blink of an eye. And foolishly, I thought, what was I thinking in hindsight? It looked like one was going to blow them out.
That's what I thought the same. I thought the same.
Thought that, which is shame on us for thinking that because it did. I mean, the first half a quarter, it was 14-0 in the blink of an eye. It was kind of like they're just going to overwhelm Navy. The defense got off to a great start too, but as often, the team was allergic to success this year. It just kind of slowly withered away. The offense kind of got stagnant, didn't do really anything for the middle 3 quarters of this game or so until that last drive at the end. And the defense, mostly good, but, some bad too. I mean, you give up a 95-yard touchdown run, the drive before halftime, also the drive to go take the lead late. Probably could have been a lot more points on the board for Navy too. If Blake Horvath could have connected on some open receivers. He just wasn't real sharp in the passing game. In general, guys, I mean, 14-0 lead against Navy. It was basically a home game for Oklahoma. Crowd was, I would say, conservatively 3/4 OU fans. Like, you just got to win. You got to win. Those are games you have to win, and they didn't do it. What'd you guys make of that part of it? Just the great start, and then just kind of more of the same, and another loss.
Yeah, I mean, you took the words right out of my mouth. More of the same. I mean, it was same song, different verse for Oklahoma offensively. Like those 8 drives after the first 2 touchdowns, just nothing going on. 2 turnovers on downs where they just could not convert. 4th and 1, could not pick up a yard. Running the ball, it had a fumble, a few punts in there, a missed field goal. It's just like it's the same thing we've seen all season. And it hasn't mattered who's been calling the plays. I mean, there's very obviously a reason that Ben Arbuckle is being brought in. He's got a tall task ahead of him. We'll see what he can do with it. Obviously, bringing in John Mateer certainly helps. Having some of those playmakers coming back, like a Deion Burks, like the young receivers just talked about, the running backs they got. I think there are some promising pieces to build on with the offensive line. Some guys that got more snaps than probably would have expected to this year. That I think that is going to pay off moving forward. But man, this offense was tough to watch at times. Man, it just more of the same, man. It's frustrating to watch. Even as an impartial observer, just being like, man, like where are the big plays? Why is everybody else able to do this but not Oklahoma? It seems like.
Yeah, I mean, looking at I thought there should have been a lot more of Xavier Robinson in the backfield. Like, I don't know why they've just gone away from him all of a sudden, like in that game, because we were expecting a really big game out of him, and even thinking he was going to be the starter. Now, obviously, Gavin Sawchuk got it, and he looked good on that first drive. I mean, scored the touchdown, everything was rolling. But when things got a little bleak there, I thought we would see more Xavier Robinson. Now, one of the 4th down plays was to Xavier, but it was out of I guess OU had been scheming against Navy for these couple of weeks that they just said, let's run their play. Because that was exactly their fullback dive. They were under center. It was in like a triple option type of formation. The guy, motions out and Xavier gets the ball right there and he couldn't get the first down. That was just weird all around. I've never seen OU do stuff like that. So I don't know what's going on with there, but they need to get more Xavier Robinson, especially next season. I think he's going to be a pivotal part of this offense because he just showed the explosiveness that you need, and he can be a guy that can take over a drive. So of the offense, that's my last points there. But the defensive wise, for some reason Brent Venables' defenses are a lot better at guarding the goal line, their own goal line, than like going to like where you're in the safety area, like where they can get a safety on the other team. It seems like they always give up the long drive or the long play when the other team's inside the 5-yard line. And at that point, you're like, why is Luke Elzinga doing all this work to pin people if he's not getting the results that Oklahoma needs? Like it's crazy. Like that 95-yard touchdown should not happen. Like there was nobody in the area of him. Like for him to run away from the entire defense, it really went the wrong way. And Brent Venables talked about it. It was one guy that didn't have his contain right. And it's like, man, that's tough to where it's a one person messes up and the whole thing is gone. It's like maybe that's just what Navy's good at, is putting teams in that situation with their style of offense. Like it was crazy. Kobe McKenzie told me earlier before the game, like he thinks it's a little bit boring because you have to do the same assignment each play. And if you don't do it right, it could be explosive plays. And we saw those throughout the game. It's just sometimes Blake Horvath overthrew his receiver. I mean, they were there the entire game for Navy. Everything they wanted to do, they got. They just couldn't convert when they absolutely needed it to. So it was just like that has to be frustrating because OU knew what was coming and still didn't really get the results they wanted on the other end as well.
Yeah, I mean, you can't give up a 95-yard play to anybody. I mean, that's the longest play that Oklahoma's given up rushing-wise since 1985.
Navy history, I think they
said.
Like,
longest play in Navy history, longest run play Oklahoma's allowed since 99-yarder by Kansas in 95 or 97, one of those two.
It was 97.
Yeah, either way. Way too long. Looked like it was either Jaron Kanik or Kip Lewis, I think, crashed to the outside and didn't keep contained inside. But then Michael Boganowski just got turned around. And by the time he realized that Blake Horvath had the ball, like Horvath was blowing past him at the 15-yard line. From there, it was just a foot race. Mm-hmm. So that is obviously very tough. A play like that changes the game. Flips field position, all that stuff. But I want to go back to the offense just real quick. One last thing. Like, we know how limited they were personnel-wise going into this game. All the departures from the transfer portal, all that. They looked like they stripped down the offense to, kind of keep it simpler based on their limited personnel. But then, like, after those first two drives, it looked like it was almost like they ran out of offense. Mm-hmm. It's like they stripped it down so much that they didn't have anything else to go with at that point. And it was just a struggle. And I know the drop passes play into a lot of that. It takes the offense out of rhythm, takes Michael Hawkins out of rhythm. It's just a tough thing to overcome. But that has been the story for Oklahoma throughout the season. It just can't get out of its own way. And that was the case again in this game. And it was like you had those two great drives at the beginning. You had an excellent 2-minute drill at the very end there, orchestrated by Michael Hawkins. And again, we talked about Jake Roberts, the job he did on that. Jacob Jordan had a big catch on that drive too. But just to not be able to put it together for 4 quarters consistently has been the problem for this team throughout the season. And that's the story of 2024 Oklahoma and why they're looking at a 6-7 record for the second time in 3 years under Brent Venables.
And if that's the case, that's pretty scary because you should be able to run the same successful plays on the same team multiple times. It worked for a reason. If you can't, and the other team is making adjustments and you're not, that's pretty worrisome. I mean, how many plays does Navy have out of the triple option playbook? I mean, they have to be running the same exact play a bunch of times in that unit. So it's just like, if you can't do that at Oklahoma, that's pretty scary there. So that's changed for real.
The offense stinks. That was the main thing for me. I mean, the number one takeaway from the actual game for me was, Ben Arbuckle's got a lot of work to do. He's got his work cut out for him. I mean, they're not close to being a good offense. The tight end room is a black hole. It's crazy that we've gotten to this spot where Oklahoma has a long lineage of really good tight ends for a long time. Multiple guys in the NFL right now that are making things happen. I mean, it's nuts. I mean, before Jake Roberts made those 2 catches at the end of the game, you had one Caden Helms catch. That was it. I mean, that they missed Bauer Sharp in this game. I mean, it's a balling. And, they've made 2 tight end additions in the portal. We're talking about one of them later. They're from Division II and from Kennesaw State. Like, not to dump on those guys, but that's asking a lot for those guys to come into the SEC and save your position. That position just is lost. I don't know why Devon Mitchell didn't play at all in this game. I mean, what do you have to lose? I mean, throw him out there. I get he's not ready, but it's a bowl game. Like, it's like you have literally nothing to lose from at least giving him some run, because he's your only hope. I mean, long term, or at least going into next season, currently on the roster. So, yeah, I don't know. Offense is bad, and that was my main takeaway. Ben Arbuckle, John Mateer, save them. That's basically the plan, right? Offensively right now, which segues into the offseason, the big picture. So I want to ask you guys. We did the Zach Alley instant reaction show the other night, which shout out everyone who tuned in. That is the highest viewed show we've ever had, and I think it's going to finish as the most viewed video we've had on the YouTube channel, period. So we got into it a little bit, kind of the big picture of everything. But as we go into the offseason now, so Zach Alley's gone. He leaves for West Virginia. Again, we talked about it on Saturday, but not a great indication of his faith in the direction of this thing, because, again, we talked about it on Saturday, but what Oklahoma should not be losing their coordinator to West Virginia. Okay, there's no spin for that. I know there's circumstance. He knows Rich Rod, all that. It shouldn't happen, right? It shouldn't happen. So that's not great. And then you look at the overall, the portal class. It's certainly not overly glamorous on paper. You got the big quarterback. But other than that, it's a lot of lower level, additions that you're taking with a grain of salt. They're going to be able to help you tremendously. We don't know, they might, but it's not anything that's going to woo you on paper. Obviously, the season was horrible. This latest game, there's still a bunch of staffing questions as far as, is this the staff? Is there going to be more changes? If there are, why weren't they made earlier? There's a lot of questions there too. Just for you guys, what are the things going into the offseason that Oklahoma needs to do? What are you watching for? Can Oklahoma fix this? Kind of, where are you guys at, just your headspace as we head into what is obviously a pivotal offseason for Oklahoma to fix this thing and to get this thing back on track and at least have some momentum again and feel like we're moving in the right direction?
It needs to do what it didn't do this season.
Yeah.
I mean, do the opposite of this season. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I'll start defensively. They need to be able to retain as many of these guys as they can, player wise. I know Zach Alley didn't really recruit really anybody on the roster this year because of when he joined the staff. So it's all guys that, Brent Venables and Brandon Hall and Todd Bates and Miguel Chavis and Jay Valai all recruited. So, if you retain your staff, I don't think you're going to lose too many players. Obviously, we already saw one, Lewis Carter, hit the portal yesterday, less than 24 hours after Zach Alley left for West Virginia. But if you can retain what you're doing defensively, I don't think there's going to be a dramatic drop-off. Obviously, losing Danny Stutzman, losing Billy Bowman and Ethan Downs and some of those guys, you need to find a way to replace their production. And, it's hard to replace a consensus All-American like Danny Stutzman. But that's why you've been developing these guys in the system for, 2-3 years to get them ready for this step. And at the end of the day, it's still Brent Venables' defense. So I have confidence that the defensive side is still going to be in good shape. Offensively, man, like I said before, Ben Arbuckle has his work cut out for him. Certainly bringing in John Mateer makes that job a little bit easier because of his familiarity in the system. Obviously, you have his former quarterback coach at Washington State there too, now as an assistant quarterback coach on staff, and John Kuzieski. But you need the offensive line to take a step forward under Bill Beatonbow. And like I said before, I think there's a couple promising pieces there. I like how Logan Howland and Heath Ozida finished the season. Sure. That right side of the line, I think, is still a big question mark. We'll see, if they add anybody else in the transfer portal, where a guy like, Derek Simmons fits into that equation, all that stuff, because he's played a lot of football, albeit at a lower level FCS program. So we'll see what happens and who takes the next step. But I think first and foremost, getting that offensive line established early so that you're not working through 5 different lineups through the first 5 games of the season. And just being able to build off that and establish the line of scrimmage. We haven't been able to speak to Ben Arbuckle yet, but when he was on that National Signing Day show, he was talking about, being able to dominate up front. And that's what Oklahoma's going to have to do to be competitive in the SEC, because they were not that this season. And we saw what happened as a result. And, the rest of it is, look, the wide receiver situation, like, it can't be worse than what it was this season, can it? Like, you're not going to have 5 guys out with significant injuries, you would think. If Deion Burks can get healthy, we know what he's capable of when he's healthy. We saw that, the first week of the season. We saw that when he was at Purdue the year before. But you need some of these other guys, whether it's the guys that are in the program for, another year, and Ivan Carry-On and Zion Kearney, or some of these guys you're bringing in through the transfer portal to really step up and be dudes. And look, they've brought in some big bodies. They've brought in guys that have been able to produce at G5 or lower level schools, but you need that to happen in the SEC. So I'm curious to see what these next few months are going to look like for Ben Arbuckle, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work cut out in front of him, and it's going to be a tall order to turn this offense around from what it was this season. But the bright side, I guess, is that it can't get much worse than it was. So any progress is going to be progress.
Yeah, it's a tough battle, man. I'm trying to think of how to put this into perspective, like how this is even going to work, because the way college football is now, you could try to develop a guy and then he ends up leaving in the offseason. Like I think it's going to come down to money. I mean, that's just pretty much what it is. You got to get the right guys and get them on the contracts that they really want. I mean, that's just the simple fact of it. Like, focusing all of your time on development is probably not the best thing to do anymore. Especially when you're in a win now mode like this, like for Brent Venables here is this next season. Like, it's just like, man, I don't know. Like, cause like how could all of those bad things happen at the same time? Like, we were going into this year thinking the wide receiver room was going to be the best, or if second, not the first, the second best on this team. And they had just a terrible season. I mean, even with the injuries and the guys that actually played, it still wasn't really good because the offensive line wasn't where it was supposed to be. Because they were trying to develop those guys. Like, you didn't have time to get the ball to the receivers that were there and things like that. It's like, you gotta spend some money, man. That's the only way to get this turned around. I think you gotta spend some money, get some of these top guys, and just let them perform. I mean, like, I don't know, because like even the 5- and 4-star guys they've gotten in the last couple of cycles, I'm not sure that they've really lived up to that hype just yet. We haven't seen guys like, those CeeDee Lamb type of guys and things like that. Those really, really big difference makers, that could be a Heisman candidate and stuff like that. I know it's a tall ask, but at Oklahoma, that's common. I mean, what do you want me to do? Like, like that's what it is. So it's like, it's a tough spot to be in, because it looks like with your defensive coordinator leaving that they don't have faith in you. I mean, that's what it looks like. And people see that, recruits see that type of stuff. They keep an eye out for that. Why would I go to that school if it's going to be a mess? Because you only get your 4 or 5 years. I mean, if you don't go the junior college route, apparently, you only get your 4 or 5 years, and you have to be the guy early on to be proven that you can be here. Like, you don't want to be a guy that's, a backup, and then trying to finally get your top spot, because then, like the transfer portal works, a 5-star guy could come in and take your spot the next season. Like, the college it's a short time frame for you. So it's like, I mean, it's difficult, man. I've been trying to wrap my mind around how to rebuild a program in this day and age, how to really turn things around. And it comes down to money, man. It just, like, you got to put some money up. That's as simple as that. You can't recruit based off of your pedigree, because if that was the case, OU would still be up there with those Ohio States and Georgias and things like that. It doesn't work like that anymore. You got to find a way to get some money here. That's pretty much what it is.
Well, and Oklahoma doesn't have the pedigree anymore. I mean, I know, like, obviously Oklahoma's still Oklahoma. They're still in the SEC. They're still a blue blood, but they are no longer a destination for offensive players, in particular. The offense, it's a what have you done for me lately? They're not going to be able to get high-end offensive players, in particular, on just reputation and name alone. That's not going to happen anymore. And it speaks to where things are, that when you look at next season, like you mentioned, Heisman candidate, and that's a high bar, but like, that's supposed to be at Oklahoma. You're supposed to have guys like that. And we talk about next year's team like being in the playoff conversation. That sounds ridiculous. So, like, at Oklahoma, they are supposed to be in the playoff conversation every single year. That they were in the 4 team. They certainly should be in the 12 team. And, I can't help but think, we've drawn parallels with 2014 a lot of times with the offensive coordinator search and everything. And the parallels have continued and continued and continued Oklahoma has to hope they continue more into 2025 to be 2015, because it was a very similar spot. It really was. It's almost weird how similar the spots are, where Bob Stoops had to make a hard decision and fire Josh Heupel, just like Brent Venables set the trail. You hire the West Texas young guy, Ben Arbuckle, Lincoln Riley. They go get the transfer quarterback from a lower program who's feisty and plays with a chip on his shoulder, Baker Mayfield, John Mateer. Like, Oklahoma, basically, it's a scary spot to be in, but that's where they are. They need Ben Arbuckle and John Mateer to be Lincoln Riley and Baker Mayfield part two. Like, that's where they are. That's the only surefire thing to turn this around. And it could happen. We've seen it. It certainly can happen. But a big difference then is that you have Bob Stoops, who had been around for 15 years and won a national title, to lead them through that. Brent Venables, can he do that? It remains to be seen, because he hasn't done it yet. So it's like, can he do that? I think we all think it's in there, and he has the right mindset, and he's a leader of men, and we all think like the person is capable of it, but it's different to be able to actually do it. So it's a lot. There's a million question marks, and like Colin and I have talked about a couple times, it's just asking a lot in one off season. But
OU is banking on development and things like that as well. But like, when your coaches keep leaving, like, I mean, Brent Venables has been the staple here, but like your coordinators keep leaving. Guys have to learn new offenses, new defenses, how this coach works. Like they have to learn that each year. It just changes things, man. Like it's tough. Like that's what's so tough about this Brent Venables tenure so far, because there have been a lot of different things that have just been out of his control. Like, it's just been like some of these things have happened. It's like, man, he can't really catch a break. Like the injuries and stuff like that. I don't know what was happening in practice. Maybe they were just beating up on the offense, and that's just what hurt him. I don't know what. Like, it's just. I'm shocked, Josh. I'm still trying to wrap my head around everything, like the way this season turned out, because of the expectations that we had. We were thinking, like, before this season, we were thinking this year, 2025, was like, all right, they're going for a national championship. Those guys are all going to be here. Jackson Arnold's going to have another year on his belt. Like, it's going to be, this team is going to go. David, I mean, they got, David and all those guys on the defensive line. Like, it's going to be great. And it's like, where's the hope for that at this point in time? Like, it's just a bunch of question marks now. Like, we're back to where we were when Brent Venables first got here, when you didn't know what the team was going to look like next year. And that's where we're at, pretty much.
Oklahoma's going to have to take a real hard look in the mirror, just like structurally, this offseason as well. I mean, Zach Alley leaves. They were blindsided by it. That's happened. I mean, they were blindsided by Caden Green, of course. They were blindsided by Lincoln Riley leaving. Like, at some point, it's like, why does this keep happening? You know what I mean? You have to find where the leakages are. And it goes far beyond. I know it all falls on Brent Venables eventually. He said that himself because he's the head coach. Mm-hmm. Like, it goes beyond him. Like, it's only so much he can do. Like, the program overall, like, even like NIL and like donor, like, all of it needs to some semblance of reevaluation, because it's all slipping. That's how it feels like. It's all slipping, so it can still be saved. They're not Nebraska yet. They haven't been bad for 20 years. They weren't even what Texas went through, bad for 10 years. It's been a few years, and they won 10 games last year, right?
Exactly.
But it's still, from where Oklahoma is and where we're used to, this is awful by Oklahoma standards, right? Mm-hmm. Which Reynolds talks about all the time, the standard. So it's a massive offseason, and we're gonna have a lot of time to talk about it. But Oklahoma's supposed to be a blue, but look at Alabama. Like, look at how their people are reacting to it. Then they win like 8 or 9 games this year. Like, 9 games. They're still like, what in the world? They're trying to get rid of the coach now. Like, it's like the standard. And it happens everywhere. I mean, Alabama went through, before Saban got there, Alabama was not, a perennial contender either. Like, it happens. Like, great programs go through dry spots, but you have to find a way to pull yourself out of it.
It's cyclical.
It is. And so we'll see. It's going to be a major offseason in a lot of ways. And we're off and running as it is. As far as the portal goes, we do have a few things we want to kind of make sure we recap there. Let's backtrack. We'll start with the additions first. Cole Gonzales from Western Carolina, quarterback, committed on Christmas morning. They need another quarterback. I mean, they've had everyone leave that room basically, except for Michael Huggins. Because Arnold's gone and Steele Wassel's gone and Brandon Zerbrug. So you kind of were looking around, like, obviously you got John Mateer to be your guy, but you still need more bodies there, because you only have one or two, that's how you get yourself in a sticky spot like Oklahoma did a couple years ago in Brent Venables' first year. So they bring in Cole Gonzales from Western Carolina. Obviously, you've already had Derek Simmons, the offensive tackle, so some familiarity there. You're kind of creating a little bit of a pipeline for Western Carolina, it seems like. Obviously, they needed a guy here. What do you guys think of the pickup? I mean, as far as a third stringer, which we're assuming that's what he'll be, looks pretty solid on paper to me. I mean, your options are slim for guys who are going to sign up to be that far on the depth chart. What do you guys make of the pickup here, though? It felt like just kind of one they needed to make, and I think pretty solid one given the circumstances.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I mean, he's obviously got a lot of experience, over 6,600 career passing yards, 51 touchdowns, all of it again at the SCS level. I think it's a good depth piece to add to that room. Again, second season in a row where you're only bringing back one quarterback from the room. This time around, it's Michael Huggins Jr. Last year, it was Jackson Arnold, and everybody else around him was changing. A guy that I think that, look, again, we all expect John Mateer to be the guy. Like, that's why Oklahoma ponied up and brought him in. But I think it'll be interesting to see, I think Michael Hawkins will be the backup, but also, do you want to keep in play the possibility of, retaining Michael Hawkins' redshirt next season?
Good point.
That's what you
and
want.
I think Cole Gonzales is a guy that if you want to go forward with that plan, you feel comfortable with him, coming into a game, whether it's, in a pinch, if something were to, let me rephrase it. If something were to happen to John Mateer, Michael Hawkins would be your guy. Sure. But if you're in, at the end of a blowout or something, you don't want to burn a year of eligibility for Michael Hawkins. You have no problem turning to Cole Gonzales to take a handful of snaps in there for you or play for the second half of whatever game. So I think it's a quality pickup in terms of just a depth perspective, an experienced guy to add to that room. Other than that, yeah, like you said, you have a little bit of familiarity there with Derek Simmons, but just a solid depth pickup to kind of round out a rebuilt room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like this pickup. I mean, the type of production this guy's had, what Tom just read off, 51 touchdowns, over 6,000 yards, that is really, really good. I mean, that's something you want to see when you pick up a guy from a lower level college, to say, somebody like that to come in and be an added depth to your position group. That's a really good pickup for OU. And I think this is one of the better ones they've had, I guess, in terms of helping with competitive depth of their room and things like that. That's a really good pickup because they just have a Jet who's coming in as part of the recruiting class. So you want to add another guy. Now you have 4 quarterbacks to work with here. And I think they're in pretty good shape here. I like the quarterback room for Oklahoma going into next year. It's everybody else that we're going to see. Where are they at? That's the big question marks, I think.
No, it's a good point from Tom, too. The ability to use Cole as your more traditional backup. But, yeah, if John Mateer were to have an injury or something and you needed to win a game, you have Michael Hawkins right there, and you have the 4 game of cushion. Mm-hmm. It does seem like if John Mateer is your starter for all 12 games, it just would be foolish to burn Michael Hawkins' redshirt next year in a backup role, putting him in garbage time and stuff like that. So this provides you a little more – flexibility in that area, which is a good point by Tom.
Yeah, and I think that's something that Oklahoma needs to really look at itself in the mirror, because the last 2 years you've had situations where a quarterback has burned a red shirt when they've not necessarily had to. Last year you look at the handful of snaps that Jackson Arnold came in to run that jackhammer, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. Package, and it's okay, why are you doing that? And then you have to burn his red shirt in the BYU game. It's be a little bit more, just proactive about everything and have a plan moving forward. Don't waste snaps. Be efficient with what you're doing with that plan. Because again, and look, I don't know if Michael Hawkins is even open to redshirting. Maybe he wants to, even if he's not the starting quarterback and he has an opportunity to get in there and get some development, maybe he wants to do that and not, use a redshirt year. That's totally fine. But if there is a plan for him to redshirt, you need to stick to that plan and be smart about it and not just throw him in there for meaningless snaps in certain games, especially early in the season.
Mm-hmm. That's what kind of things we really liked about Jackson Arnold this season, because he could have still redshirted after he got benched. When he came back, even players like Devon Sears talked about it on X. He was he really could have sat down on us, and he came back and played, even though he knew I bet at that time he knew he was not going to come back to Oklahoma. So that's a really good thing from Jackson Arnold, just to add that in there.
Elsewhere, another addition on the offense, Will Huggins from Pittsburgh State, tight end, second tight end they've added to go with Carson Kent from Kennesaw State. Look, obviously, you have to figure strictly a depth addition here with Will. He played 4 years at Kansas before Pittsburgh State, so he did play at the Power 5 level, but he didn't play much. One career catch for Kansas, and that ironically was against Oklahoma for a touchdown, believe it or not, in 2020. That was his one catch he had at Kansas. Kind of funny. And now 5 years later, he's going to be at Oklahoma. Yeah, like I kind of talked about earlier with this tight end room, I just don't know what the plan is here. And we talked about it with Colin a little bit a couple of weeks ago. It just, I think we all thought when the season ended that almost more than likely Joe John Finley probably was going to move on to another gig, probably maybe something where he could be an OC. He did some nice things down the stretch. And now it kind of like it's felt the last few weeks like that still might happen, but now it's like it's almost January, and they've made 2 tight end additions in the portal that both are not going to blow you away on paper, certainly. Who knows? Maybe one of these guys surprises. I don't want to turn into a dumping session on these guys, but the room, certainly you're looking at it like, okay, who are we leaning on here? Guys, obviously you can talk about the addition, but just the tight end room in general, it's kind of it's a question mark, obviously, going into the offseason. And they have the post-spring portal window as well. But right now on paper, you're kind of looking at it like, man, is it going to be much different next year? Because, you're kind of wondering where the big bodies are in terms of being big forces in the passing game.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the Huggins addition,
yeah.
I'm with you. I think there's just more of a depth piece.
You hope, right?
Yeah. I mean, the thing that's intriguing about him, at least, is you look at his size. He's 6'7", 255. Like, that is a big dude. I've heard he's a pretty good blocker, which obviously Oklahoma's tight ends struggled in that regard this season, especially going up against some SEC defensive ends. So you like to see a guy that's got, a bigger frame like that, see if he can be that, inline blocker that you might need offensively. But other than that, I think it's a depth pickup. As far as the room overall, I think you're kind of banking on Devon Mitchell taking that next step, and
which makes it even crazier. He didn't play against Navy.
Yeah. And Caden Helms, taking, or rather being able to stay healthy, and be that kind of pass catching tight end that you really think he could be, and has shown when he's healthy that he is potentially able to become. But yeah, I mean, it's not a great room right now. I think there's potential with a couple of those guys, like I just said, but otherwise it's like, man, what's going on here? And, not to dump on these transfer pickups, but, a guy from Kennesaw State and then a D2 transfer is not anything that's going to blow you away at a position that really struggled this year.
The good thing about, I guess, this pickup is where he's coming from. Like when I was at UCO, this is a common opponent for them, Pittsburgh State. Pittsburgh State is the top of the D2 programs when you get to that level. Like that's the good thing. Like he's coming from a school that has high expectations, that wants to win every single game no matter what. Like that's what he's coming from. So coming to Oklahoma, he should be familiar with that type of mindset, because people want to look at the Kansas stuff, and maybe things were a little bit different at Kansas at the time when he was playing football there. But now it's, things have changed. But that's what I like about it. Like, he coming from that school, as Tom said, he's a really good blocker. We've seen that a couple of times on his film and things like that. And so maybe he's just coming in to be that guy for when OU runs those double tight end sets that they're become known for over the last year or so. Maybe that's what he's in here for. So that's what I took away from it. He's a big target if he does want to catch the ball and things like that. He can be. I mean, we saw that Michael Hawkins found Avion Carrion a lot in the bowl game. I mean, so having that type of size definitely does help, and especially when you need a catch on third down, things like that. So that's where I see it.
For sure. And we'll see. It's no dumping on Carson Kent or Will Huggins. It's just that's asking a lot for guys from Kennesaw State and Pittsburgh State to jump into the SEC and be like, okay, now fix the tight end room, for Oklahoma. Yeah. We'll see, but it's asking a lot.
Yeah, Huggins kind of strikes me as, and I've not watched him enough, but just like looking at what he's done, kind of strikes me like the Blake Smith edition a couple of years ago. It's like a block first tight end, a bigger body guy that can help you from that aspect.
Sure. Pittsburgh State too, one of the truly elite.
Yeah, exactly.
The Gorillas.
Yeah.
So great.
They sell out almost every game in Division II football, which is
they're a good program.
Crazy.
And I love the logo. I've always been a fan of the aesthetic out there.
Yeah.
As far as the other side of the equation, departures, Tom briefly mentioned earlier, Lewis Carter into the portal. We wondered, was Zach Alley leaving? Would there be anybody, and specifically in that linebacker room? Obviously, only Lewis Carter could tell you if this was directly a result of Zach Alley leaving or if this was kind of always going to happen after the bowl game. But either way, he's in the portal. This one stinks for me personally because I've always been a big fan of Lewis Carter. Obviously, this year he showed a little bit that he played. He was not a finished product, so I didn't play more. Made some young player mistakes, but the raw ability has always clearly been there, and he still has a lot of upside, in my opinion. Was he going to start next year? No, or at least almost certainly not. But you need depth, right? You can't just have first string in that. That's it. You know what I mean? So this is a good blow, in my opinion, at least from the depth perspective for next year's linebacker room. What about for you guys with Lewis Carter moving on? This is, and again, just another one that you felt like with some more development could have been really, really good at Oklahoma, and we won't get to see that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Lewis Carter still has what it takes to be a real quality FBS linebacker, Power 4 linebacker even. We've seen some of the potential there. But yeah, like you said, I think from a sheer depth perspective, I think they might need to go get a linebacker in the portal now. I know Brent Venables said they didn't really need much defensively, but I think you need to add one now because outside of, Kip Lewis and Kobe McKenzie, not much experience there. It's tough. And then, obviously losing Danny Stutzman, Deshaun McCall already gone too. You're bringing back Samuel Masigo and some of those other guys below them. But it's just like outside of those three guys that have played, you don't have a whole lot of experience. So I think it might be worthwhile exploring adding another linebacker to that room.
Yeah, because at this point, you're hoping that guys like James Nesta and maybe in Marcus James that's coming in can be, very quick contributors. And I know Brent Venables talked about Nesta being a guy that was getting more run here for the bowl game practice, but it's like, yeah, that's a tough situation to be in. So I think a linebacker pickup is probably necessary. I thought this, Lewis Carter leaving was a surprise because we were all assuming he was going to get a lot more run going into next season. I know he's only primarily been on special teams his first 2 years, but it's like you were expecting him to get more in the rotation and be more of a guy for that unit. And so it's weird to see him leave, especially for a group that Brent Venables is very good at developing himself. He's shown it in the past. Linebackers is the group he can really develop. So that's where I see it.
Yeah, this position went from really deep to really not so deep very, very suddenly. The fact you only signed one linebacker each of the last 2 years is now kind of haunting you a little. And we'll see how it all shakes out. But we talked about at the time, they only signed, it was just James Nesta. And then this past class, it was just Marcus James, only one linebacker in both classes. And so, you're looking around like, okay, Kip is obviously the face of this, and then Kobe McKenzie. But Fomo Seago's playing Cheetah, which he might. You're hoping to have Kendall Dolby back. And maybe you can make a portal addition from someone who can step in there. You have some other options too, like a Michael Boganowski or maybe a Reggie Powers or something like that. But, you're kind of – I agree. I think you probably need another guy at that position all of a sudden, which, again, it was one of the deeper ones on the team just a couple of weeks ago. So – changes quick, it moves quick. I also don't know who's going to coach that position either, as that's another question mark that may have contributed to this for Lewis Carter. All right, I think that's just about everything. A lot's been happening. It's been busy already. The offseason is underway, though. 2024 in the book. It's exhausting. 2024 is in the books. We shift to 2025. Callaway back on Thursday. We'll start to really, I think, get into some of the DC search stuff as far as what Oklahoma's going to actually do there. We might get into that a little bit on Thursday as well as some other portal stuff and things of the like as we shift into 2025. Conference play for basketball starts. Both teams are winning, so
good side.
Thrust yourself into basketball if that's what it takes to get your mind off of the state of the football program at the moment. And we'll have a lot more of that over the next several months as hopefully a fun winter for both those teams as well. I think that's it for now. Back on Thursday with Colin Kennedy and James being on that show as well to do some portal stuff and other things going on. DC search, like I said. For Tom Green, James D. Jackson, I'm Josh Callaway. Signing out for now. We'll see you back on Thursday for the next edition of the Sooners Illustrated podcast.
See you.